Cool, let's go live here. So, thanks for joining. Hi, Ram and Frank. Thanks for joining. Glad you could hear me. Good. Yes. Cool. Nice. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. And we are at the top of the hour, so let's get started. Obviously, if you have questions along the way, so we got people from all over US. Do we have India also? I doubt we have Australia. Yes, but let's get started. We want to talk about migration and what you can actually do in terms of migration, automating the process of migrating. What is it that can actually be done currently? So I think we hosted a webinar in November about our migration edition, what was going on in our migration story. We have since then been building on top of this, making a lot of the things easier to consume, getting started with. And we definitely see more and more people that are starting with the migration. And now we have also seen SAP's migration tool. Have any of you guys tried that? And how did you find that tool, and did that solve your need? Hopefully it didn't solve all of them. And let's see some of the things that actually works here. Cool. So let's get started. We'll talk about how you need to plan your migration. We'll talk about prepare, what you can automate, and then let's get started with these things. And yeah, questions along the way, just put them into the chat or the Q&A, then I'll cover them when we get to those sections. So who is Figaf? So I started Figaf a long time ago. 7 years ago, I got a great idea to create a tool that could automate testing for SAP PI PO interfaces, because that was something that did not exist at that point in time. It was something developers did not really want to do. I guess no one really want to be testing, because it is just complicated and challenging, and the easier you can make it, the better. And that was when we get into the creating a tool that could automate this. And then we needed to learn a lot about what was going on the PI system, and we just expanded the application. We added support for cloud integration, I think we did it when it was CPI. There they added the Trace API that made some of these things a little easier. And then 2 years ago, we added the PI to CPI migration capabilities. So before we get started, I think it's an important part to understand your current landscape. What is it that you currently have in the PI system? What makes sense? What is actually running? Get an understanding of, okay, so what's the scope? What do we have? Because I think a lot of people will say, okay, we have 245 ICOs in our system and just migrate them, and no one has any clue about what is going on, because these has been created over the last 15 years and they're just there. They work and no one cares, but it's obviously important that you know what's going on, what is the different setup, and what you actually can see for these things. SAP released their migration assessment that give you an understanding about what you can do of how much integration you actually have and what is going on. We also added our own migration assessment report, or to give you an understanding about some other details, because I think there is other ways to deal with it. So we do not come with an estimate on what this migration will take, because that is a little challenging, not knowing more about what scope you have and what are the gaps that exist. And you understand what's good, what's bad with your integration. Okay, so let's look at the assessment. So we did create a as a part of the Figaf tool, we do have a tool that allows you to create the assessment. In this video, I show you how to get started, and I can do it in like 30 minutes. You create it on your own system, or create it on your laptop connected to your PI/PO system, download all the content into your local instance, and then you can generate this report. So it may require you have a computer with a good amount of memory, but it is possible to on most laptops out there at the market. So 2-3 gigabytes of free memory is sufficient. And yeah, spending 30 minutes on creating a report makes a lot of sense. Let me show you the report and how easy it is to, well, let's just show the report. So here's the report. This is what we'll get from this. We'll get the sender modules, what are the protocols. So here we can see if it is file content conversion. We can see the operation mappings and how these operation mapping is configured. What are the different message mappings that is used here? What are the function libraries that is used in each of these ones, so we can have an understanding about, are there some of these scenarios with a lot of function libraries? We get information about multiplicity, export parameters that is being used. And I think we also have some RFCs. So we're using some RFC lookups, and we get this information. And this is obviously really useful when you are going into migration and say, okay, so we have 5 interfaces with RFC lookups. How do we deal with these? Is this rework, or do we just migrate those as they are? What do we have here? This is some large-scale receiver. I think that sent a lot of messages on. And then we have the number of messages that has been processed on this. So from this report, you can drill down and you can go in and you can create a better estimate about how many ICOs do we need to migrate. What's the important part of this scenarios. And yeah, you can create it just using our free trial edition, sign up, connect it, and fetch all of these different data. Any questions on this assessment report? And yeah, I think it is really a good idea to create it and understand what is going on in your landscape before you get started. Actually, for one of our PI customers, I also created this, and it's okay. It saved us quite a bit of time instead of trying to merge this together with some Excel reports. That was anyway always a bit complicated. And I guess we will be able to give you a lot more details than you would actually be able to fetch if you're doing all of this manually. So, anything you are missing in a report like this that you could use when you're doing the migration? Cool. So this is the report. And then once you understand what you have, you need to understand what is it that we want to achieve. What does the future roadmap of integration? Hi, Ty. So if you want to create it, you follow the guide. I think I don't know, did we post a link in the chat? Otherwise, you'll get it tomorrow. But once you have done that, you simply just go to the Figaf tool under the migration setup. You need to download this, run the tool, and then you need to set it up. So yeah, you can click the link here, then you can see how to create it. And once you have connected, you simply just click generate, and you can select what are the master data we want to use for this. And then it compiles all of this together and shows you what is going on. So there was a question. So as you can see, it is different from SAP's report. Um, that we show you if you have parameters. We show you if you have RFC lookups, which could hinder the mapping. We do show you what are the different modules that you have, because I think in general, something like using a we can see the different patterns we guess on that. This is using a dynamic configuration beam is not something that is covered by this or by SAPs. And I would, if I were doing a migration, I would not say, okay, we're using content modifier, let's add 5 hours to the estimate to fix something like that. And we are not providing an answer that this is going to take you whatever hours to create these migrations. And obviously, that's it. We do not work with BPMN, PI BPMN, or NetWeaver BPM, and it does not, as I see it, make sense because, well, it is both using BPMN notation, so it should be pretty simple, but the backend and underneath all of this is two different things. So I don't think we will be able to get a good result. And I also think that it is a bit challenging to actually create a consistent result that you could just reuse. And with our PI to CPI migration, that is a lot easier. Is that what you're looking for on the BPMN part? Chat. Cut off the way. Cool. Okay, so that's the report. It's free. Just sign up for a trial, then you can access to it, and then once you anyway have access, just continue with the tool. Okay, so yes, we want to talk about the future architecture. What is it that you want to do? What is your the view on integration that you have? What is the when is your S4 project going on? Because that always will have a lot of dependency about you having to upgrade the system. And if you do have that coming, maybe it's a good idea to be in integration suite, because then it's just easier. And I think, getting someone external also to challenge you in these things is an important part. Some other question? Thanks for clarification. No questions. Good. Yes. So and I think it's following a little the same way. I think it makes sense to get some external consultancy to help you in this, because doing a migration is just something on top of your existing development work that makes things a little more complicated. So the more you can get to work on these things and get someone else also to give you input perspective, the better. And obviously you need to understand it and be willing to say, okay, let's try to see how we can automate it. What is it that makes sense for these scenarios? Good. And then now you have an understanding about your future architecture, and we could obviously draw a fine graph about what that should look like. You need to go in and try to estimate, okay, so what will this take? And a couple of weeks, or I don't know, in January, we created a full episode of this. What is it that you need to estimate? How do you actually estimate this migration? Because it is, if you've done 1,000 migrations, you may have a pretty good understanding about, based on the assessment, how long time will it take. But no one has that at the level, and it is also going to depend a lot on your organization, your governance structures, data, etc., and how to get rid of this. And there's a couple of things into this. So it is more than just okay, we need to migrate this ICO or the receiver determination. We also need to test it. We need to promote it to production, document it, all of these different things that is a part of such a project. So estimate more than just the development time is a good criteria. Good. Yeah, and if we start to talk about migration, so if you're saying, do you want to do a one-to-one or do you want to redesign it? I would say obviously the best way would be to redesign everything to work for that new architecture. And there is going to be integrations where you really need to start over and see, okay, this is how we're dealing with things. This is what can be done. And this would be the best way to redesign. Well, yeah, best to redesign everything. I don't know if you would agree with that, but there is also a cost to this. And I don't think that the value in a lot of scenarios is high enough that it makes sense to redesign all of your integrations, because yeah, you may have some super good developers or a good team to help you with these things, but it also just makes things a little more complicated to actually be able to deal with these things in a simple way. And yeah, I don't know. I think what's your take on this? Do you want to redesign everything, or is it okay to redesign the top 30% that makes sense, and then throw out or just migrate as much as possible with the capabilities that we have? I think that it makes sense because yeah, you're saving time on it. So SAP also in this January released their migration tool. I hope you have tried it out and see what it can do, and what are the gaps it has, because I think sometimes they do have some, or for some scenarios they are better, but for others I think it makes sense to invest in creating some better iFlows, creating an easier migration experience, because that will just simplify the way you're delivering. Hi, Jack. And yeah, that's where the Figaf tool comes in and see, okay, let's see how this can help you with the migration. So what is it that the Figaf tool can do in terms of migration? So we do have, as you saw in the first slide, a lot of different components that is a part of this. The testing, the DevOps, the transport management, documentation, and migration. But if we just look at the migration, here we have an efficient way of filtering what are the iFlows that you have. So you can go and say, for this ICO, I just want to migrate this specific part of it. You can then reuse existing migrated content. You can create local processes for each of the different receivers that you have. And then it builds in a retry mechanism that ensures that you are not, that in most cases the message will not go to the GMS, but only in the 3% of cases where there is an HTTP communication problems going out from the system. And yeah, we are improving it. We just over the last 2 months have been adding a lot of new features into it to make the migration easier. A part we also have added a lot to is the message mapping, where we do migrate message mappings with function libraries, which really makes the process a lot simpler, because I don't know, once you have created the assessment, you would know how many of your mappings has external libraries into it, or function libraries. They are migrated into a Groovy script, and then you can go in that Groovy script and make sure you replace some of the functions. So in PI, we do have the container object in a UDF. In CPI, it's a context object. They are a little different, so you need to adjust it, and that's a shame. Yeah, parameters is mapped into it. Multi-mapping is supported or built envelopes. We have RFC lookup, so if you have a message mapping with an RFC lookup, it will create a framework for you, so you can actually, with a bit of Groovy code, create the same RFC lookup, and thereby actually have the same flow. And once you have done these a couple of times, it's pretty easy to create these RFC lookups. We add the XSLT, and Java mappings is just empty Groovy scripts. And channels, we are taking them using XSLT templates. And I think that makes it a lot easier for you if you have scenarios where you say, okay, we are using an on-prem PI or a file system, but when you move to CPI, you need to translate that to a SFTP or FTPS scenario, and how that will connect via your cloud connector is something you need to determine, and then you just put that into this XSLT, and then each time you migrate some of these, they will be created in this way. And we do deliver some templates that you can start out with, and then you can improve with your own ideas. If we just look at some of the differences, we support 7.1 to 7.5. We support dual stack migration, so receiver or classical receiver determinations. SAP only supports 7.5 and only ICOs, and I think they have a roadmap item to add 7.31 and 7.4 also to the mix, but only the ICOs. They're based on fixed templates. We use CGI, computer generated iFlows, that allows us to actually create iFlows that follows your scenarios. Yeah, we have the function libraries, we have integrated with the testing, and then we can reuse migrated artifacts. Yeah, if we talk about testing, obviously it's an important part of the scope. Gartner estimates it's 60%. I'm not sure where that is, and obviously with the Figaf tool, we can take, the way we're testing is that we take some messages from your PIPO system and replay them on your integration chute system or the upcoming iFlow. And the reason why you want to do that is make it easy for developers to actually run these things immediately, instead of waiting 2 weeks until someone has time to start testing a given interface. And then they will see, okay, there's these 5 problems with this, and then everything goes back, and the 10 interface this developer has done since then or whatever all needs to be reworked. So that's why I believe the more you just put into give the developer, you push the timeline further towards the developer. So after he have created the initial migration, he can run the test, and you can see, okay, there's a UDF. I probably need to figure out how I update these things. But other than that, it looks pretty okay. And yeah, if you, for instance, have B2B, you need to do something, so you do not need to bother your EDI providers and say, hey, we are implementing a new system. Does this give you the same result as we had last time? Yeah, because that is also going to take you 5 weeks to coordinate with them. And I think it's the coordination that does also add a lot of complexity to it. And obviously, you cannot limit test. You need to do some end-to-end test and see, okay, is this also working? And when you're connecting with partners, do they have open for that specific IP range, or how do you actually communicate with the partner? So we can never eliminate it. Hopefully we can make some of it easier to understand and run, so developers can do it without having to wait until someone from business gets time to it. Cool. Yeah, let me just skip the DevOps part. I think let's do the demo of the migration, and then we can talk about DevOps a little later. Okay. So here we have the dashboard for the migration. And once you have gone in, you will connect it to your systems. You will then set up, I'm doing the migration from one or more PI systems to one or more CPI systems. And then you can also add a system for production. Yes, the tool will show you payload comparison, how the message is processed in versus the PI message. But let's get to that. So right now I have an iFlow here. Let me say, okay, let's create a new one here of this. We will invoice web, call it like this. We can select one of the more profiles here. So we can select the default profile. This was our original way we created the iFlow. So we have a sender agreement. Here we can select one of the XSLT templates for that. We have the receivers that we can set up and say, okay, what are the ones we actually want to use for this? And then we can specify which specific receiver are there, any of the receivers we want to exclude when performing these things. And then lastly, we have the migration content where we can see what are the different resources that we have in the system and how do we actually migrate these things. So here you can see, okay, have to support this dual maintenance. If someone has updated some of the objects in the PI side, you will be notified in here and say, okay, there's actually a problem. You need to check what this is going on with. And then we're getting a list of, okay, some of the things we need to fix, like the container variable that should be fixed. So we can preview what this looks like. And then once we're done that, we can migrate, and then it'll create an iFlow based on the content that I already have here. Directly into my iFlow in the package. And here we can see what this flows look like. So this was what we originally had. It had some limitations. I think it's probably okay for synchronous scenarios, but we also added our new beta one, and some would call it advanced. I'm not sure what we will end up calling it, but let's see. Here we have some retry type. We can add GMS here, and I can then perform a check again. We need to perform checks to see to do a sanity check. For this, we'll preview it. So we can now see that it has local sub-processors for each of the different flows, and that looks pretty good. And if we press migrate, we will migrate it. It is still the same name because we did not change it. So right now I can see this iFlow. We can see we have added the FTP channel here. We have added external properties, and you can control this in the XSLT templates you're using. Here we have a flow where we have a multi-mapping in. So we remove the declaration. We add the multi-mapping structure. In our message, we'll then have we'll be using set it up as a multi-mapping structure with the different lines that we're adding here. And then we will split it and remove it and send it using a SOAP channel. So let me just edit here. I think we can actually, in some cases, we can deploy it directly. Here we can. Let's just save it as a new version. So this is version 1. And we have synchronization also with CPI helper. So we can easily just synchronize it into the Figaf tool. And if we do that, we have an option here to actually go and check versions to see what has been changed between these different scenarios that we have. So we can see that this flow has been changed. So a visual comparison makes some things a lot easier to understand what is going on here. some of the different areas where it is missing. I'm not sure what it is missing, or this is just a large change that we have. So we can go in here and see the differences between some of these scenarios. Good. We did not deploy it. Let's see here the problems, deployment status. Okay, anything on the migration that we should be covering here? Otherwise, I'll go on to the testing part. So I have created some test cases here on our development system. I guess this was the one I had created. We may be able to have some time later where we can create test cases. But the idea is that we just select record messages. We can specify how we want to create test cases from the PO system. We can also do this in batch mode and select a number of ICOs, fetch some messages for these things, and then use them when we get to the relevant tests. So we will select migrate test cases. We will select the last test case that we created, migrate to CPI flow, add it to a test suite. Let's just create a new one. And then we can select where we want to be using a specific element here. And we can see we have these scenarios here, and you want to figure out how this works in your landscape. So we come with some suggestions on this. If you've used SAP's migration tool, you would need to select the place where you want to check out the flows in, and then we can select here open test case after migration. So now we have created a test case for this. So we do have an option here to do some modifications into it. So let's just add a price here, change the price, just so you can see, okay, we can actually modify these. We'll just add the price here, update, and then we'll run a test. We can select where we want to run it. If we have multiple systems, we can run it on the system that makes sense for this. We need to get license. I'll also take a DevOps license because we may get time to do that also afterwards. So now we have hopefully been able to send a message into this iFlow. We can see here if messages has been sent. We can see here we have been able to send the message and we have received some errors back. And I hope this is what you're looking for, Thomas, that we can see, okay, there is an issue up here with some timestamp that is different. We can go in and ignore that, so we would not see that as difference anymore. So we have it on the payload level, and we can also go in and do comparison on message payloads, but that becomes a little more challenging because attribute and headers, at least for migration scenarios, because there you don't have any headers once you start out working with these things. So since we updated the price on the initial one, we can just update our test case here to update to this new one. So we'll drop all the tests. And what we can do is we can just go back, run this again. So it will send a message into the system, process it, and when we can view the result, and hopefully now it will be all green. We can easily see where it has run. So we can see what is the iFlow that's actually being triggered by this. We can see the messages that is being processed here, and obviously, yeah, the CPI helper makes it a lot easier. If we had a CPI iFlow, we wanted to create a test case for it, we just switched it into trace, send a message, and then we can actually just create a test case in that way. but that's that's a little different story anyway. So let's see. So now everything's successful. We have compared, we have accepted the change, and now when we are running this, we would always see this as accepted. So if I go back to my migration overview, I can now see that this one, we have one test case for it. We cannot see the status here, but we can easily go in and check the test cases when they're run, last status, etc. We may pull this out also to the report. So that's the story about being able to test the migration and how you can run it. And then, yeah, you can check once this is in production. Let's try to just continue, and we may be able to do the DevOps later. So what are the different versions and options that we have? So we do have a trial version. You just go to figaf.com, sign up for the trial version. You select the on-premise deployment, and then you can deploy it on your own laptop or in BTP if you want to share it with a team. It is actually the same process with the migration edition. We just need a company name there, and you will then get access to the Figaf tool for a year. It will give you access to the assessment, this migration overview, and then it will allow you to do the regression testing. So you can take a PI message and run it on CPI or cloud integration. We do have the DevOps. This would allow you to take the iFlows, move it into production with all the documentation, governance, externalize parameters, virtual tenant where you can reuse a dev system also for more purposes. So use it for dev and QA. And then we have the ICO migration. That's a different add-on that will take the ICO or receiver determination and migrate them. Good. And here it is in a little different way with the different options. So the ICO migration is about taking your ICO with message mapping, all the artifacts, create new iFlows for it. And you have the DevOps that takes all of this, move it into production, increase the developer's productivity. And the business case, if you look at it, so let's assume it will take you like 2 days in general to migrate, test, and document this. And if you just have a rate of 100 euros per hour, then it's 1,500 euros to migrate these iFlows. I should probably have added that's 16 hours instead of 2 days. That's a little strange. Anyway, with the tool, it's obviously really depends a lot of the scenario, what we have, test cases, how difficult it is to create. But maybe you can save like 4 hours on the testing because you have an easy way to create the test cases, migrate it, and run it. You would at least save 2 hours on the development effort. So here, the Git repository, the reuse of artifacts, the function libraries that is included saves you a lot of time. And then you got the transport and documentation process that also just makes it easier for you as an architect to prove who have made which changes. So that will cost you roughly 200 euros in license if you're using both options, both the DevOps and the migration. But if it is like a 50% reduction in time, it is well worth the investment and understanding of it. So yeah, I really hope that you want to try it out. In like 2 to 3 hours, you're actually able to create some decent scenarios and explore the tool. You can run it locally on your app. It's just a jar that you download and run on the system. Then you connect or you deploy it in BTP. That takes a little longer because if you have or if you do not know how to deploy into the BTP systems, connect it to your systems, create the assessments, perform a sample migration as you just saw, try to test this one, and then you can perform the transport process. And then once you've done that, you can start planning and estimating, because the easier it becomes to run these things, the better. Will you add the... So the last thing, probably a number of you have a lot of EDI scenarios. Next week, I'm doing a session with a Danish company called BizBrains. They have a product called Link, and this allows you to easily sign up or easily manage the EDI infrastructure. So adding new trading partner, manage and deploy it, all of these different kind of things. So if you have a large EDI section or part, go see that one. So for now, we do not have support of EDI in that way. But yeah, we're probably going to add some support for using SAP's TPM module. But I also think that BizBrains have an interesting product that makes the flow a lot easier for you to manage. Cool. If you want to talk with me, you can schedule a call using this link. Do you have an example of the generated Groovy script? Cool, thanks. Good question. Yes. So if we look at this this iFlow here, we can check. We can look at this message mapping here. If we open this message mapping, we can see we have a parameter here that's been added. We can read the script that is being connected here. So this is the UDF that has been converted into a function or a RFC or a Groovy script. And one of the things we do is we replace the $, because that is not allowed in Groovy, because that's replace double quotes with a $, is insert variable, as I recall it. So it is something like that, and then obviously you will get some warnings that you need to rewrite parts where you're using the container, getting traces, these kind of things that is not supported. But once you have done it once and pressed save, you will actually be able, next time you do a migration, it will reuse the same artifacts. So you do not need to rewrite all the function libraries multiple times. Does that make sense? And the other one is for parameters where we have this is in the PI system. This was a constant with a parameter map, and this is just created into Groovy scripts. That's a fixed Groovy script, and then we are adding the flow out here as a own parameter ID. I guess it could be optimized and move it into here, but for now I think it's okay. I think one thing I do think we made, well, general pretty cool was, so if your iFlow fails, the idea is that you will add it to a GMS queue. And then this GMS queue will then be processed each time it fails and send it to that specific part of the flow that has been reprocessed. By using this in the GMS and not send it into GMS and process it, then we save persisting it into a GMS queue and getting it out. So for the 95% of things that will work, this just makes things a little more simple. Yeah, so the example I showed before was where we had a parameter that was mapped. So I think we do have a gap if you are talking about having a UDF with a parameter in. That one is not supported, but I think we have we have the two extremes. So the Groovy function to export it, and we have the setting of the parameters, so it shouldn't be too difficult to handle these things. Other questions? Please, yes, just ask, and then I'll try to cover these things. Since you have not asked too many questions, let me just talk about the DevOps, because I think doing a migration project is obviously going to involve moving 200 iFlows into production. So you need a good solid way that can do that. And this is where we've added DevOps capabilities to simplify the process. We have the governance in place you need. We can reuse a dev system for both dev and QA. And with the integration suite licenses, this is a clear, easy win to use it. So that means you can actually have a governance in place without needing to pay for an extra tenant. We have the transport process. We have externalized configuration, so you can apply this. You can, as an architect, you can review what someone has done and approve. You can create documentation about all these different things, and then all the content is put into a Git repository, so you can set up different scripts to work on different scenarios, or use pipelines to trigger CPI lint, or whatever you need whenever you're creating new iFlows. But let me just show you how easy it would be to transport this. So right now we have our iFlow here. I will just assign to a ticket. And yeah, just put questions into the chat or the QA section. I'll cover those. Webinar demo. If spelled correctly, it's probably a good idea. So we'll select a landscape. I'll just have a sample here I'll be using. This is reusing the same tenant. So right now I can then see the objects that's assigned. I can attach all the required object for this to work. So we can see it also adds some script collections that is needed for it to work. I can look up test cases. And here I can see the different test cases that I have that matches some of these scenarios. Let me just see this. This one. So because we have added the script collection that's used in a lot of scenarios, yes, it was this one. So you can add it here. We can then run these tests. And obviously, the more you run, it's not really a big problem, but just makes it a lot easier to test. It just takes a little longer time. And eventually we will get a success message in here once everything has been processed correctly. So we can see that the same test case we run is always successful. So this just makes the process a lot simpler, that you can have all of this in one go. I'll start the transport. I can configure the externalized parameters here in advance. I can either do it on a landscape level, so I do not need to remember all the S4 hostname, how they transition all backend systems. If you just add those transition into this overview, you just click and then you're getting what these values are going to be. You can obviously replace a given value here. If you need to, press save. And then you send it to approval. You can set up on each landscape who can approve it. I can approve here because it makes the demo easier. Obviously, you should not approve your own stuff. As an approver, I can go and compare this iFlow, so I can see the same comparison flow we have up here. since this is something we're transporting now, we do not. It is not yet in the system, and we have a number of other scenarios that you can compare message mappings, etc. So I just approve it, and now I can import it. So it'll import it into this given system, apply the configuration, deploy it, all of this without I have to do something, and it just makes the process a lot simpler. No need to write scripts, etc. And this is why I think a tool like this makes the development process or the governance process much simpler. And it's also something you would be able to use after the migration has completed, that you have a good way to deal with these things. Transport completed. We can roll back if you want to, if there was a problem with these scenarios. Cool. So that was the short DevOps. There's a lot more on how to manage versions, etc. that you can go into, but that's like the short transitions of what's going on. Other questions? I don't see anything I missed. Yeah, we covered that one. No new. So are there anything that you see that we need to improve to make it useful in your organization? I'll see here what I'm missing. And let me know if there was something I missed. But yeah, I think if we moved into production, or the system mark as production, we'll see it here. And in our report, so we do not have a way to deal with our proxies. I guess you will revert them. SAP published a solution to use some other repository for these things. I guess it's not really ideal to deal with in that way. We did consider to in the Figaf tool to expose Vistals in a similar way as the proxy tool does. So you will just create a proxy message, and then you can actually fold this out, and it will, or create a Vistal, and then on top of that, in sproxy, you can then generate the proxy. I don't think it would be impossible for us to do it, but obviously there needs to be a good reason for us to spend the effort on creating something like that. But then that would be linked to the iFlows that you then have deployed. If you have an iFlow, and I guess, I don't know if it should just be all iFlows that had a Vistal, then you could select that. So I think it will be possible, but obviously it would require that it's something that is being requested by a customer, and then we'll see what could happen there. Did that? Thomas, did you remove your question? Thanks for clarification. Was that what you're looking for, Ty? But I think they had a view on it. Or a blog post about it, but yeah, I don't think it was ideal. But yeah, I guess running a PI system is not ideal to have these sproxy transactions. But I'm not sure how much you're actually modifying of these things, and if it just makes sense to have the Vistals in the CPI system. Once you want to generate it, you download and fix it. Because I guess you would somehow also need to have a link that says this specific iFlow is using this this proxy setup. Other questions? Anything else? Cool. So yes. Yes. Yeah. If you have more questions and we did not cover it, you can schedule a meeting using this link. Invite your team, and then we can talk about how this could work with your scenario. What are you missing? Otherwise, I will just encourage you to go to the Figaf site, sign up for the trial, and see. It should be easy for you to go through. If you run into problem, book a meeting and we can cover how you can get to complete these steps. With most development users, you should be okay to create this. I think the only thing is you need API access to the PI system, and then you're good to go. Any concerns? Then let's schedule a call and figure out how we can deal with these things in a simple way. We will be updating the flow that we're creating. I think we need some input on it. I think one of the first thing would probably be to put it into a GMS or data store, because then you don't need a queue for each message. We do have a monitoring also as a part of it. So we do have two. One is to look at messages that is being processed, a little like SAP's on-demand monitor, but we are just giving you some more columns in. You can export all of this content as a CSV, and then you have access to persisted payloads, MPL, data store entries in one go, and you can give access to business user for this. We also have an alerting capability that would allow you to, so each time a message has failed, it will trigger a payload here. So it will create a error, or whatever we call it, an event, and then we can go in and we can create a new rule that says, if we are getting this, put these data into the queue, send it to a specific person, and then that person would know how to deal with these things, hopefully at some point in time. So it's like a learning tool. Each time you get an error, you will add this into it. And I think we have a lot of other features into the tool that just makes things a little easier, like an iFlow documentation tool that allow you to document this is a message mapping comparison. So if you have a message mapping, when you're doing the migration, you can compare multiple PI message mapping to see, are they almost identical? So let's maybe migrate it into one flow, and maybe that's more the EDI part. And the one was the transport or documentation of an iFlow, where you can see what were the changes that requested, what were the iFlow configuration across the landscape, and documentation, and it will also get message mappings. So there's a lot more than just the migration, but it's a good way to start. And if you have not started migration, it's also a good way to see if this is the way you want to handle your future architecture. Cool.